morning, and thank you for joining today's Coresight Connect. As a reminder, if you have any questions, please submit them using the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. Now, here's your host, Deborah Weinswig, CEO and founder of Coresight Research.
Great, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for our second Coresight Connect. We thought we'd take the opportunity to review what's been an interesting start to the year from a conference perspective. And we have two of our analysts on. We have John Harmon, who leads our technology research. We also have Owen Riley, who is covering our macro side of things, but also has a significant focus on the tech side of the world. And just to kind of talk through what they saw, what they experienced, and perhaps kind of pull out a few themes from the event and kind of see what we can take. I think that these are some of the recent reports that we've written from a Coresight perspective, and definitely a big focus on the future, especially around kind of 2021 trends. Here's the team that will be here with us today. And let's get started in terms of focusing on some of these topics for CES. And so we really pulled out 5. Of course, there were many more. There's much around telemedicine, telehealth, and we'll dive into that kind of a little bit more. This idea around automation and already some of the announcements that we've seen this year, 5G, and John's even talking about 6G now. So we'll hear more from him. And then sustainability. There was a really interesting video, I thought, specifically in presentation from Samsung around packaging and not only kind of how to have less of it, but how to recycle it. And then just this idea around kind of technology benefits, this idea of kind of doing well by doing good type of stuff. So I think that if we look at the number of people who attend CES, I mean, John, it's pretty significant, right?
Yeah, even though CES went virtual this year, more than 80,000 qualified people signed up from 167 countries. I
mean, I was pretty impressed. CES shared some of the data on some of the sessions that we participated in, and the numbers were really significant. What were some of the new themes, John, that you heard for the first time, if there were any of those this year?
Honestly, I would say CES has its own cycles. Generally, new technologies are introduced, and then over the next 3 to 5 years, they get updated. So the major technology themes of CES were not new. Robotics, AI, digital health, 5G wireless. And I would say the newest theme that I'll get to in a bit was really just talking about how to use technology wisely, how to use it for good rather than for ill.
No, that's really kind of quite interesting. And John and I have attended CES for many years, and there's always such a kind of interesting approach. I met one of my closest friends sitting at one of the very interesting kind of AI and healthcare, probably 7-8 years ago. And I do think that this much of what we've heard has not only from sleep has been a significant focus, health and wellness, and then also anything around this kind of quantified self. And I mean, John, what did you hear this year that was new and interesting, and what are you running out to buy? That's what I want to know.
Oh, good question. I'd really I'll answer that last of all. I mean, I think there were 3 main health themes. As we know, during the pandemic, people are exercising more at home. They're buying more workout gear, and Peloton cycles are hard to find, for example. But I think the newest thing is the consumer electronics companies have responded, and they're building home fitness functions into their equipment. I mean, for example, Samsung embedded fitness features in its TV. You can dial into coaches and online workouts. You can compete with your friends. So it's all built into the latest generation of TVs. So you don't have to go out and buy an extra piece of equipment in order to exercise in your home. And as we know, many gyms, since they were ordered to close, have been offering online fitness classes, which again use your existing computers and video hardware. Secondly, we've been talking about wearables for many years, and I think they've just become refined over time and more specialized. The most recent generation monitors new things like skin temperature or your respiratory rate and your sleep. So people were taking their own health management more and more into their own hands, and wearables have evolved to be able to handle that. And then finally, I just think it was really interesting that Walmart was invited. It was really, they called it a keynote, but it was a fireside chat. And the CEO of Walmart was talking about making healthcare omnichannel. And what that means is, as you know, Walmart has eye clinics and pharmacies and all kinds of services that are included with its stores. But Walmart has been opening its own group of health clinics, and they're going to open more and more. The first one started out as urgent care clinics, but they're really making health a part of retail, and it's going to drive a lot of traffic to Walmart stores and make it harder for other retailers to compete.
Well, I mean, to me, right, the average customer, kind of pre-pandemic was in the grocery store 2.1 times per week. And, so this was already a trip that they were making. If, right, these types of services are offered, it, in some ways, in the title, right, like democratizes access to healthcare, but also, it kind of reminds us, right, oh, I have this aching or that, just to kind of take a minute and take care of ourselves. So I really, kind of applaud them for their effort. And I think there's a huge opportunity here. I mean, John, one thing that I feel like we talked about in past CESs was this idea around like compliance and, right, having, different types of wearables really to track compliance around, right, our diabetics, right, taking their insulin and other, our people taking their blood pressure medicine. Did you see anything around that? I felt like it was a little quiet.
I think that was quiet. I mean, in prior years, we've seen medicine bottles with sensors on them that can, you mentioned compliance, verify that grandma's taken her medicine, or that you didn't forget to take your medicine today. It'll send you an alert. I mean, I think that's kind of the other part of the coin. Certainly, you want to manage your healthcare, but you do want to collect the data, as you mentioned, digitizing the self to ensure that you're doing everything you're supposed to when you're supposed to do it.
Well, and mentioning one last thing, and then we'll go to the automation aspect. I remember there was a really interesting, technology, and originally it was developed for athletes, right? And it was kind of a sensor, kind of between the mattresses to see kind of quality of sleep and quantity and whatnot. And then it was, let's just say, kind of extended to also apply to, the elderly who were living at home to see, right, did they, right, could their children were basically able to monitor, right, did they get out of bed and then not return to bed, was there a potential fall, those types of things. And so I think it is always interesting, right, where you can take it from basically the professional sports sector into the rest of the population, but also just in terms of how we're seeing some of these, devices. So there's certainly been a lot of announcements on the automation front, and whether that is, kind of either keeping us safe or keeping, and safe in more ways than one. We're seeing robotics increasingly utilized at malls and whatnot, and then also this idea of shelf scanners and and more. I mean, right, bread makers and everything else. And John, I know for you the coffee is important, myself as well. But what was the extension from prior CESs, right? Was there, I think the robotic bread maker in like last year, I was very cool. What did you find this year?
Oh, I had an automated bread maker like 10 years ago. I think more than that. They've been around a while. I think the biggest difference this year, robots have been around for a long time. I think in the last 2 or 3 years, they've really gotten a lot better and a lot smarter due to advances in AI. But I think the real difference this year is using robots for safety and health and sanitization. For example, that LG robot we see on the slides that cruises through hotels, sanitizing hotel rooms. Also, robots have been used to check people's temperatures so that someone doesn't have to put him or herself in harm's way to shoot you in the forehead with a temperature gun, right? And finally, robots have been used in malls to enforce social distancing. If you're getting too close, they'll tell you, or they can tell if you're not wearing a mask and remind you to put your mask on. I mean, I think those are the new applications of robots.
No, I think that's really interesting. And of course, right, we're seeing more and more around micro-fulfillment and whatnot. 5G, I know has been a hot topic for you. Are you, we're certainly seeing kind of from a global perspective, different geographies, kind of getting deeper in this. What are you seeing from a U.S. perspective, and how will this impact retail this year?
So I think it'll take some time. The good news is that the major 5G networks among the major carriers in the US were turned on last year. You can get 5G handsets, but I think the applications now are, under development. But I think it really offers a lot of promise for retailers. I mean, for consumers, you can download movies faster, you can play games faster, you can do AR, VR. But for retailers, it's really the Internet of Things concept that 5G enables companies, retailers, enterprises to track millions of things. So it really plays into supply chain that you can track, if you so desire, every truck on the road, every drone, every container, every pallet if you want to. And these radios are kind of expensive. You're not going to put one on everything, but it really helps retailers have end-to-end supply chain visibility. You can know where everything is at all the time. If a truck gets diverted or break down, you can know about it in real time. And also there are other cool things for retailers like interactive video kiosks that play video that updates over time to time in high definition video. So that's really it for advertising and retail. And then finally, the low latency, the faster response time of 5G will be good for AR, VR, augmented and virtual reality, and gaming. There are a lot of new applications, new business models that we haven't even thought of are going to arise from this technology.
Right, which is really, I think, quite interesting. Sustainability, which has been a key really for Coresight, and has really started to impact how we think about the world and think about consumption. Can you talk a little bit about what we're seeing from a tech perspective? And we had one of the kind of conversations in the chat, which was, how can retailers use technology to be more sustainable?
Yeah, great question. I mean, there's several ways. For starters, enterprises are moving to the cloud, retailers are moving to the cloud. These huge cloud data centers are being constructed, and they use electricity, which generates carbon. So the data center cloud service providers are cognizant of how much carbon they're generating. For example, Microsoft said it's going to be carbon negative and water negative by, I think, 2025. And many data centers are putting solar cells on top of their buildings to reduce their impact. And looking at sustainability for retailers, there is a big role that technology can play in terms of minimizing their carbon impact. For example, that SAP did an example with a demo with Porsche, where when you're ordering a car, you can decide whether it's shipped by rail or you pick it up or so on, and you can pick the carbon benefit options for how you get your product. So it gives a consumer a choice about it. But also for retailers, there's waste, there's spoilage, food is wasted. It's really important in grocery that technology can help retailers do good while doing well. It can help them better manage their supply chains, which can help them reduce waste and spoilage, and help consumers and help themselves at the same time. It also ensures that the package of food you pick up in the grocery, that it's not past the expiration date, because you can track that and take measures, maybe discount it at the end of the day if it's about to hit its expiration date. So it'll certainly make the consumption of food much more efficient.
Yeah, and I think that there's a big focus right now on waste, and from a sustainability perspective, and this is where it kind of all ties together, right? Intelligent supply chains and whatnot. And to me, that's kind of incredibly interesting and helpful. I think that we also had a question in the chat, or that applies to slide 12, is what are the potential benefits and pitfalls for retailers using AI? Do you want to dive into that, John?
Yeah. AI is a powerful tool. I'm kind of thinking of like the Terminator movies. It can bring huge benefits to humankind, and it can have negative effects as well. One of the topics in AI is biases in data. For example, if you're looking at data to decide who's approved for a mortgage, you may inadvertently discriminate against certain groups. So the key in AI is to make sure that your data is free of biases, and to monitor the process and look at the outcomes and adjust the process so that the results are fair and biased. And AI is a really powerful tool. It finds connections between data that humans often don't see, which gives a lot of power to enterprises and retailers if used wisely. And as I mentioned, this is the first CES that really took a step back and thought about how technology is used, and the tone was optimistic that it would be used for good.
No, that's fantastic, and I think that we're going to turn it over to Owen. Owen, do you want to just give us a high level, and then we'll kind of dig deep?
Yeah, hi Deborah, hi everybody. Yeah, so I think we saw 5 key themes at the NRF, at least from my perspective. First was about personally engaging with customers online. I think as people have shifted their time and money online, retailers have had to adapt and make sure that they can give that same sort of personalized service that you get in a store, also through those online channels. Second, there's also always people beating the drum about the store, becoming less relevant. That wasn't really what we saw at the NRF here, but what we did see is that it does need to be reimagined for the new, post-crisis age here. Also looking at loyalty being a key area of investment. Consumer spending habits have really been in flux over the past year for obvious reasons. And I think now is really an opportunity for retailers to be able to leverage loyalty programs, building communities, other tactics like that to really retain those customers and ensure they keep getting a good return on investment on them. And then also looking at integrated data systems. So, as things become more omni-channel, of course, everything on the back end and the front end gets more complicated. Making sure you have all that data in one place, really easily accessible, was also a big theme talked about a lot. And then finally, understanding, where we are now and where we're going to be, maybe a year from now, once people start to go out more, maybe some pandemic-driven behaviors reverse, maybe some stay. Understanding those and what's going to stay and what won't for who was also another theme that talked about at the conference this year.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that, kind of as we look at the slide, this whole idea, I mean, it's interesting, we've spoken to many retailers about this, right? Customization, personalization, also starting to even getting consumers together in, if you will, highly curated groups just to kind of talk about, right? I mean, especially if they have an affinity for a certain type of activity that they're purchasing products for, but for the retailers to start to curate this, I think starts to drive a different relationship between kind of retailer and customer. What else have you seen on this kind of personally engaging idea?
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point. And the consumers now, they don't want to just be, consumers of the end product. They actually want to have a say in what products are made. So I think we're seeing that a lot in customization. I think you're also seeing that in consumers want to be able to, see how things look on them in particular. We saw a demo of a custom shop, a concept shop called the Corner Shop during the NRF. And one of the features they had there was, this AR, VR, virtual try-on technology that I think consumers are really liking, so that they can see products, not just as this general thing available for everybody, but also customize it to themselves, see how it fits on themselves. So I think people are really looking for that personalized experience, whether that's in store or online, and also to play a role in, how the product will actually be for them.
Now that's really quite interesting. And then, if we, I mean, hey, we've obviously always been big fans of kind of the physical store, and this environment has allowed everyone to kind of reimagine, right? We're very much focused on, different types of technologies that allow for live streaming from the store, because it gives it kind of a either after hours or a second purpose in case stores aren't open, and also drives a different relationship between the retailer and the customer, right? There's a lot of new technologies. A lot of this is data driven. What are you seeing from there's a lot happening here, whether it's like micro fulfillment. Some retailers are saying, right, that 70% of their orders that they're fulfilling are out of the store. What did you hear at NRF that, kind of changed how you think about this, Owen?
Yeah, so I think what I heard at the NRF was, it is about technology, like you're saying, but it's also about people. So we heard, from Salesforce, they did a survey that said, 76% of retailers report planning to increase their investments of tech to, help out in the store. 47% of those also said that they are going to increase their investment in people. So I think a key thing that we heard at NRF was technology isn't just there by itself. It's there to empower the store associates, empower the people in that store. So, if you can automate stocking, if you can have, analytics, enhanced inventory management, you can free up store associates to, going off of what we said on the previous slide, actually interact more personally with consumers, foster those relationships and really get all, the mind-numbing stuff that might take up store associates' times previously done automatedly, so you can actually focus those store associates on crafting those customer relationships there. Also goes to the AR and VR technology, personalizing, what consumers do in the store, and also actually personalizing how they experience the store. So we saw also in that same concept store, the ability for you to, personalize the store experience to every consumer that walks in. So, the first time you walk into the store, you take a quick little survey about your preferences. From there, you can use your AR on your phone to direct yourself towards products best suited for your needs. And, the store associates actually have the ability to customize the lighting, the music, anything like that in the store to the people who are actually in the store at the time. So I think these are really interconnected with the personalization piece as well, in terms of, reimagining the store for the consumer that's, increasingly demanding that they have this personalized, engaging experience.
I think that's really, critical and really kind of rolls into this idea of loyalty. We talked a little bit earlier about this idea of kind of, creating communities, connecting with consumers. And then also, since, the journey oftentimes used to kind of begin in store and then end up, kind of either offline at someone's home or online. Now this kind of online, right? We call it in China like O2O, right? This online to offline, kind of journey that we're seeing, right, is really interesting. And I think loyalty is so incredible in terms of a way to have the consumer, right, feel connected to the brand, but also to understand, I would say some of the attributes. What have you seen here? And, were there any retailers in particular that, kind of spoke to you, Owen, in terms of what they're doing?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. It's about having the touch points wherever possible, whether they're online or offline. So I wanted to highlight, a few, based on what I heard at the NRF, some of my favorite examples of brands that have been able to create really strong loyalty programs and have a lot of touch points with consumers, outside of just the point of sale. So I think Nike is the obvious, really good example of this. They have their sneakers app, they have their, Run Club app. They're able to actually get consumers, to be talking about Nike, even when they're not even thinking about buying a new shoe, even when they're just going on a run. And I think that's hugely successful for them there. And just, obviously the brand's awareness is already super high, but just getting people talking about it, keeping them in touch with the brand, even when they're not buying. The North Face is another great example, I think, of this. They have a great loyalty program where you don't just get rewarded for buying things in a store, you actually get rewarded for checking in places around the globe. And, they'll reward you for, you're going on this hike, you're going here. They'll reward you for that as well. They'll also reward you for downloading the app, interacting with it. Things like that, again, keep that interaction going beyond the point of sale and merge the offline online experience there as well. And then finally, this is a slightly older example, but what we heard at the NRF really made me think of this was Sonos did a great job when launching their Sonos One speaker of actually leveraging social listening data to identify different consumers that were, really attracted to the brand and really influential among their peer group. And then they reached out to them personally, created that personal interaction, really got these consumers on board, not just to buy the new product, but also enlisting them basically as, unpaid brand ambassadors who are actually generating this great word of mouth advertising to people in their social circles that really got the brand out there, got people talking about it, retained the existing consumers, but also, added these new consumers by, using their network to reach out to others.
Yeah, I think that's, really critical right now. And, certainly some great examples. What we've seen is not only having an integrated data system, but also just being able to kind of collect and clean the data. And right, as so much last year happened, as I like to say, like duct tape and glue, right? Everyone just moved incredibly quickly. What do you, right? I've spent a lot of my career around like predictive and prescriptive analytics. Now with kind of AI and ML at the place that it is, are you seeing retailers talk about this as they, were presenting it at NRF? And, and if not, why not?
Yeah, I think we did see a good deal of talking about this at the NRF. And I think one key part of it was the accessibility piece. So obviously there's a lot of excitement about, how predictive we can be, like you say, with AI, ML. We're no longer looking backwards, we're looking forward, which is really key to also be able to do that in real time. We've all seen how fast the world can change now. Consumer preferences are changing very quickly, probably more so than ever. So being able to have access to that data in real time, make those, however small they are, but being able to make those adjustments, within the minutes rather than hours or days time frame is key. And also, like I said, that accessibility piece was really, I think, what was most talked about at the NRF this year. I already mentioned how it's important for store associates to be able to leverage data to, customize the customer experience, be able to inform customers of, what's in stock, what's not. Obviously, that was a big issue back here in 2020. And I think, we saw Sally Beauty was one example that we talked about at the NRF here, using IBM Sterling OMS. It enabled them to roll out, ship from store capabilities incredibly quickly because they knew all of their inventory was sitting where it was at all times. And we also saw Estee Lauder using a similar system to improve their customer support by giving their call center associates access to all of the data that they had across their system so that they could be informing customers, where this inventory is, when something might get back in stock, and also actually, give suggestions of products that consumers could also buy instead if a product was out of stock, which unfortunately was happening a lot more in 2020. So I think we're seeing this predictive AI-driven analytics being used not just, in the supply chain on the back end, like we've been seeing for, a few years now, but also being brought towards the front end, more consumer facing, improving that consumer experience there as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. We've got a question from the audience, and once again, just during the conversation, I've tried to, pull in a lot of the Q&A just into the questions I've been asking, but please just use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen, and I'll address them. But one question came in around, kind of accessibility, right? Are you seeing, retailers trying to, drive accessibility, either if it's for, kind of people with disabilities to shop, right? To have some kind of, whether it's in the in-store environment or whether it's online, or is that still, kind of a significant area of opportunity?
Yeah, really, Deborah, I think that is still a significant area of opportunity. I didn't hear as much about that as I would have thought I would at the NRF this year, potentially because there were so many other issues that people were focusing their time on. But I think that is something that's going to be key moving forward. And, almost accidentally, I think we've taken steps towards that by, implementing curbside pickup. Obviously, that greatly improves accessibility for consumers. Also, working from home on the other side of things, something that makes things a lot more accessible for employees to hold a lot of different jobs that they might not have been able to before the pandemic. But in terms of what retailers were focusing on at the NRF, I think there's a lot of opportunity for an increased focus in that area.
Yeah, no, I do as well. I mean, this is to me, if we all can figure out, right, like the date that we're going to be kind of on the other side, we could all prepare. But, right now, as we're kind of continuing to live in this, new normal environment, we keep getting asked, right, what behaviors have changed? What do you think sticks? What do we see on the other side? I mean, certainly if we want to look at, right, the change in shopping behavior by the silvers, right, whom, not only are online in a kind of whole different percentage than they were previously, but also their shopping behavior, and especially kind of the grocery industry, right, which has grown kind of like 10x online. It was like 2.6 penetration, and now it's like 26. I mean, you're talking just some crazy changes. What do you see in terms of, demographics, change behavior, and, kind of post-crisis outlook?
Yeah, so I think we are going to see a lot of stickiness with a bunch of pandemic-driven behaviors, especially, there's been a lot of talk about grocery, a lot of talk about older shoppers going online for the first time. As you can see, they tripled their online spending over the course of the pandemic. And I think a lot of that is going to stick. We do a consumer survey every week where we understand what behaviors are going to stick post-pandemic. We saw that 48% of consumers, over the age of 60 actually plan to keep shopping more online once the pandemic is over. And we also see a big difference in terms of demographics geographically. So I was looking at some data the other day that showed that, in terms of being an urban rather than a, rural or suburban consumer is really going to play a big part in how you're working from home, what your life's going to look like post-pandemic. We're going to see a lot more people in major metro areas still working from home following the pandemic, I think, whereas you already have in other areas of the country, a lot of people going back to work, resuming some sort of everyday life. So that's going to drive, maybe more online traffic, more focus on, goods for the home among those consumers in large metro areas, whereas retailers will have to, kind of revert their strategy back a little bit to what they were doing pre-pandemic, not just focusing on those online channels for consumers that are going to have to go back into work. And it's important to note that they tend to skew, not urban and also less wealthy and slightly less educated. So we saw, with workers with a bachelor's degree far more likely to be able to work from home, far more likely to be still working from home after the pandemic. So kind of understanding those demographic shifts is going to be key for retailers to understand, what they should be doing as we kind of walk the tightrope of, still being in the pandemic, but trying to plan for the future where hopefully we're able to get out and about a bit more.
Well, it's really quite interesting, right? Because, there is a large retailer who's kind of it was a very interesting article requiring, right, their teams to go back to the office for 2 days a week starting in March. And right, so this whole idea about creating culture, and one of the comments was, right, how are you creating culture in like a pandemic by kind of, it's really like forcing people to go back if they're not comfortable with it. And so I do think that not only having the technology, right, so if you're in a meeting and right, some people are on Zoom and some people are not, right, like how does it feel like everyone's together? I do think this will be really critical. And I mean, hey, they'll be kind of the next Zoom, right? And how do we feel? I mean, hey, right, maybe there's like holograms or whatever, but like we're all in an office setting together, right? Even if some of us are virtual, and I think we've all learned, right, how to work in different ways, as well as, that, even from like a talent perspective, right? I mean, that, everyone doesn't need to be in kind of like a central location. So I feel like there'll be, what we're continuing to learn here. And, that's, kind of what's very interesting. So, we're kind of right at 11:30, and I think there's a few more questions from the audience, so I'll ask those. If anyone has any additional, please drop them in the chat. And want to thank you once again for our very quick roundup of NRF and CES. We definitely spent several days, much of the team, attending both events, and so there's detailed reports on each that you can access on our website, and kind of happy to send you anything else. We'll send out this deck afterwards. But what we're seeing is this question. I'll start with you, Owen, and then we'll finish off with John. Is can you provide some tangible examples of retailers who you think are best capitalizing on the trends you mentioned seeing at NRF?
Yeah, one that comes to mind right off the bat is Best Buy, who, at first glance might have been somebody that you thought wouldn't really, do super well through the pandemic, an in-person electronics retailer when a lot of that stuff can be available on online marketplaces as well. But I think they were really able to leverage BOPIS super well, which we saw really impact, sales over the holiday season. Retailers who implemented BOPIS curbside pickup did a lot better than those who didn't over the course of Black Friday weekend. And I think Best Buy was the best example of one of those who were able to pivot their traditionally, in-person, very traditional retail experience to something that could be omni-channel, that you could order online and then get delivered in whatever way you wanted. They really leveraged their store network well and adapted that online aspect as well to really combine that into the omni-channel experience that was able to thrive during the pandemic.
Great. All right, John, one last question for you. If all the technology, right, with CES usually being kind of very forward-looking, what in your opinion is, I'm trying to pull a few questions together, is like what's the key that retailers need to do to think about today or tomorrow? And if they miss it, it'll, kind of have a, it'll be like an oops in terms of, wow, we should have thought about this earlier. Where should they be focused? Because they have so many balls in the air, as Owen kind of alluded to. What's kind of like the one key takeaway from CS that they need to focus on today?
I think the number one that I didn't discuss it is you've got to get into the cloud. All enterprises, and particularly retailers, need to move to the cloud for the following reasons. Obviously, you reduce the expense of buying IT hardware and having a staff to management. But moving to the cloud, because the software is updated more frequently, it lets enterprises and retailers benefit from these advances, new software. It also lets them experiment more, test more, and develop more, and fail quickly and pick up. And your retailers need to compete with e-commerce companies that are already in the cloud and they're already doing this. So it just lets them innovate faster and frees them from the baggage, from the chains of their legacy hardware systems. Once they have that, sure.
Well, it's interesting too, right? Because we're also seeing, right, many retailers who are looking at like new ERP systems are now like, kind of how can we, Band-Aid this with a few startups and just move faster. So I think there's this whole idea, right? The cloud is critical because it can drive speed, but also there's, I don't know, I guess I feel like there's this like speed component that and this like kind of fail fast and fail forward and all of that. Did you feel that at CES?
Absolutely. There was certainly a lot of talk about, again, the cloud enables enterprises to test more frequently and make changes more frequently and then adapt more quickly. And there are new software architectures that are available where rather than having a huge monolithic software package that you're really bound to, that new generations of software that are always all in the cloud, are more modular. You can connect them faster. You have to do less programming. You have to do less customization. The things you do might already be there. So there are new things that are here today, new architectures that let enterprises move much, much faster.
Great. With that, we'll conclude and be fast ourselves. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. John, Owen, your insights are invaluable as always. Once again, we'll make this deck available, and we have quite a bit of research in depth on the 2 events. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next month at the next Coresight Connect. Thanks, and have a great day.